As others have spoken, the Dharma Sansad in Haridwar in the northern state of Uttarakhand should not be seen in isolation, and I'm not going to talk about it in isolation. The theme of the conference itself was premised on Hindus facing a supposed existential threat from Muslims, who, by the way, make up about 14% of India's population. And the conference was filled with calls to carry out large-scale massacres of Muslims in order to institute Hindu supremacy over India. These open and virulent calls for massacres and quote-unquote cleanliness drives against Muslims was unfortunately also paralleled with violence against Christians that coincided with celebrations of Christmas. The violence, one example, which was documented in the New York Times, but worth reiterating here, reported that in Chhattisgarh, which is a state in central India, in September, BJP workers conducted anti-Christian marches during which they belted out converters. Let's beat them with shoes. Later, that happened. In fact, a member of the BJP youth cell in Chhattisgarh, Rahul Rao, openly bragged of slapping a pastor, quote unquote, 5 or 6 times, further saying that, quote, it was immensely satisfying. Anti-conversion laws have been strengthened in order to criminalize the free expression of religious faith. It's as it probably most of you know, Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is kind of the basis of the post-war human rights framework, is so very crystal clear that all of us have the right to our own beliefs, to have a religion, to have no religion, or most importantly in this context, to change our religion. And so this, to link back to this Dharma Sansad, it openly urges these Hindus to emulate violence, as I think Dr. Stanton mentioned, against Rohingya Muslims and Myanmar, and boast about it. And then they boasted about this call to action in the days afterwards in the media. And it's illustrative of the atmosphere of bigotry that pervades these groups. And I think as Sunita mentioned, Uttar Pradesh Deputy Chief Minister Keshav Prasad Maurya defended the open incitement and hate from the Dharma Sansad in an interview to the BBC, and it speaks to the current atmosphere. And as this conference was going on, we heard about this absolutely despicable bully by so-called auction of Indian Muslim women. And I bring this up, others have brought it up, and we're going to hear again from a victim of that, who, and this is one of just hundreds of examples of the casual dehumanizing of Muslims and other minorities in India. In fact, some of the people who otherwise are condemning it sort of mildly in sort of the Indian mainstream, sometimes I've seen it on social media, dismissing this really sickening act as a quote unquote prank. And so I just want to reiterate that I absolutely think that we cannot view this in isolation. No, we can't view it as in isolation at all. And to view it in isolation really allows Indian society, even more well-meaning parts of Indian society, to ignore the systematic nature of this hate and bigotry. As Dr. Stanton referenced in his presentation, we're just a few weeks before the 20th anniversary of the horrific violence in Gujarat that killed upwards of, it could be up to 2,000 people, and it's mostly Muslims. And many in the audience had forgotten about this. And to be honest, a few weeks ago, I hadn't forgotten about it, but it slipped my mind that we're coming on the 20th anniversary of this horrific event. And as Dr. Stanton noted, it was actually, we also forget that the name of the then new chief minister of Gujarat, who had just came into office, after the earthquake, he was an up and coming politician by the name of Narendra Modi. And after a few months after the violence, Chief Minister Modi tried to use the violence and tried to dissolve the state assembly and call elections early to take advantage of that. The election commission at the time rejected that early call, but the term of the assembly was expiring, so it was held in late 2002, and the BJP swept to re-election. And some of the losing candidates, some of the losing BJP candidates were very upset that the reason that they lost in their seat, in their election, was because there was a lack of violence and rioting in their district. And that's why they lost the election. Paul Brass, who's an academic, I think he's at the University of Washington, he may be retired now. He wrote an excellent, very rigorous academic study. It was called The Production of Hindu-Muslim Violence in Contemporary India. It's really just a absolutely very well-researched book in about violence in India. He argues that they could, from a very rigorous look at the evidence, and it points to, quote, a methodical anti-Muslim program, which was carried out with exceptionally brutal coordination. But we don't even have to look 20 years to see this. Again, it's not in isolation, right? We don't want to see this. We don't have to look back 20 years to see this hate and bigotry in display. Just late February happened to coincide with former US President Donald Trump's last foreign visit as president. I mean, he didn't go to that many places during his presidency, but his very last foreign visit as president was to India to sort of, as culmination of the Howdy Modi event in Houston, Texas. He had a corresponding event in Gujarat, to join with Prime Minister Modi in 2020, late February 2020. It happened to also, while that was going on, there was brutal violence in Delhi that killed more than 50 people, majority of whom were Muslims. Amnesty International was on the ground there documenting a really disturbing pattern of human rights violations committed by the Delhi police. The buildup to the violence is instructive, however. In December 2019, of course, the Citizen Amendment Act was enacted. This really bigoted law specifically discriminates on the basis of religion by excluding Muslims seeking citizenship when they or if they're not an Indian citizen already. And I want to get to in a moment how this bigoted law really applies to Indian Muslims who are citizens now, when it's coupled especially with the National Register of Citizens. Now, this CAA passage led to widespread but peaceful protests. However, 4 days after passage, Delhi police entered Jamia Millia Islamia, a very, very well-known and prominent university in Delhi, and brutally beat up and sexually harassed student protesters. Excuse me. Then on January 5th, 2020, a mass mob entered Jawaharlal Nehru University, laying siege for more than 2 hours, yelling, quote unquote, kill the anti-nationals, and quote, the traitors must be shot dead. Then on January 27th, in an election rally in Delhi in response to a protest site led by Muslim women in Shaheen Bagh, which we've forgotten because of the pandemic and everything, but we can't forget this amazing and inspirational protest led by Muslim women in Shaheen Bagh. The Union Home Minister, who I'll get to even more in a moment, said that the BJP, this is during an election rally, can keep the, quote, country safe and prevent incidents like Shaheen Bagh. And on that same day, Union Minister of Finance, Anurag Thakur, encouraged crowds to yell, quote, shoot the traitors to the nation. The next day, another BJP member of parliament, Parvesh Verma, said that protesters from Shaheen Bagh would enter homes and, quote, rape your sisters and daughters and kill them. And further promised, quote, not leave even one mosque standing after BJP's election in Delhi. Now, the BJP actually lost that Delhi election to the current chief minister's party on February 8th, 2020. So those tactics didn't work. But I would just want to cite one thing about the Delhi riots. There's a lot of documentation about what the police did, but one of the things that I think is important in this context is really one of the survivors of the violence in Delhi called the 100, which is the equivalent of 911 in the United States, seeking help from the police. But the person answering the phone just told that survivor, quote, "You want azadi," which means freedom. "You want azadi? Then here, take azadi now." So didn't even bother sending help at the time. Now, I mentioned the National Register of Citizens earlier. In that 1.9 million people in Assam were excluded. That means that they may end up without any citizenship despite decades of residence in India. And when you combine it with that bigoted CAA, the Citizenship Amendment Act, the NRC is weaponized against Muslims in India. There are camps in Assam that are now housing those who have lost their citizenship. Because of the bigotry of these laws, India stands to create the biggest statelessness crisis in the world, which will create unimaginable suffering. And of course, the vast majority of those affected will be Muslims. So I may be being hyperbolic about this, but I want to just quote India's Home Minister, Amit Shah. Before he became Home Minister, he was the head of the BJP. And then in the 2019 elections, after that, he became Home Minister. But he had called Muslims in Assam, quote unquote, termites, who are, quote, infiltrators who should be, again, quoting, uprooted. And so if you don't know, the Home Minister is the most powerful internal security official in India. As Amy Cosman and many others, Amy Cosman, who's the Financial Times New Delhi bureau chief, and many others noted, that language, that using the word termites is so very similar to the Hutu power supremacist Parivar, where they called Tutsis cockroaches in radio, television, Mille Collines in the months leading up to the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. I mentioned these moments, and I can mention just so many others, just to show that this hate and bigotry that was the topic, that was actually the topic and in the name of their conference in this Dharma Sansad didn't come out of the blue. And in what I just said, I didn't even mention the 1991 Yatra Racha, led by a former BJP leader, LK Advani, who is now considered a statesman, I might add. He did this march all over India, which there was violence all along the path during this this march, this chariot ride through India, and also culminated in what that did was culminate in the destruction of the Babri Masjid mosque in December 1991 in Ayodhya, and so this has been perpetuating over the decades. And as with Amit Shah calling so-called infiltrators termites, this is repeated and brutal calls of violence against minorities in India, and it must be called out forcefully. So thank you very much.